Let me share a story. You and a few of your friends commute every day at your local bus stop. There, you see that same crazy old man who talks smack about everyone who walks past him. He's crazy but funny, calling people names. He never seems to actually ever do any work. He just talks and talks and talks all day. But one day you walk past, and he isn't saying much of anything, just muttering the same things to himself over and over. Oh well, you say. He must not feel well. You go to work. On your way home, though, you pass by his bench and notice him still sitting there. He isn't saying anything, though. You walk closer and realize the man is dead, sitting upright. You learned a lesson that day. Just because a body is sitting up doesn't mean it's alive. Oh, and hey, by the way, have you heard a Christian comics creator lately has just lost his cover artist because of cancel culture? It's true. That creator's name is Doug TenNapel, who everyone and their dog knows as the creator of Earthworm Jim, who I interviewed on this channel only a few short weeks ago. It was a good one. You should check it out. His book is called Bigfoot Bill Volume 2, the link for which is in the description below. At this time, I'm going to ask everyone to pause the video and make sure you bookmark that link. Grab a copy if you can. Unfortunately, it's sad to see that cancel culture is still real and thriving. Even if I disagree with people about certain subjects, I firmly believe that nobody should be punished or harassed for their beliefs. I guess I'm not surprised that cancel culture still exists, though. Neo-Puritans gotta purify, after all. You can't get mad that people like that exist. Not really. Evil is as natural as bacteria, and you can't get mad at the coronavirus. Just the people who enable it. You know what does disgust me? The silent compliance. The people who watch horrible things being done to others and do nothing, because it doesn't involve them. They hide their cowardice behind a screen of being non-confrontational, not making any waves, just promoting good vibes. Evil people thrive because good people say and do nothing. For the record, I will never call myself a friend to such a person. They seem to me like the type who will watch you get robbed, beaten up, will leave your body on the side of the road when you need them most. They'll ask, "Are you okay?" in private, while making fun of you while the tough kids are around. Maybe they'll even throw a tomato when others are watching, just to prove they're still one of the gang. Maybe they're only friends with you because they're so compassionate, trying to get you to come back around. These people are nothing but fair-weather friends as far as I'm concerned, as worthless as a wet paper bag on your head as you stand in the rain. Cancel culture has taken another bite out of a Christian comics creator's business. And look who's cheering. For everyone listening, I recommend you pay very close attention to who's who. Take notes if you want to learn who might be on your side and who won't be. Because when it's your turn to be put in the guillotine, these are the people who might be cheering too. If you're still living on the CG side of the fence, listening to them cheer as one of their former top creators is being harassed, you should probably wonder where the bad guys have been this past year. They're not in front of you. Maybe they're behind you. It would have been nice 2 years ago for all of us to have had each other's backs, but now that the well is drying up thanks to strip miners and snake oil salesmen, I would say CG is dead. Killed from the inside because people don't have the guts to speak up. They didn't, and they don't, and the chance is gone now. When everyone cheers as cancel culture punishes a creator for standing up for his beliefs, you can rest assured of what happened. The body is still sitting upright on that bench. The corpse just hasn't fallen over yet.
Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing today?
Are you still the Hut now or Diversity in Comics?
Well, the channel's name is Diversity in Comics, but I'm still the Hut, and it still takes place at the comic book Hut.
All right. Someday we'll like map it out, draw where the Hut is and all these do an
Well,
illustration of it.
I'm the third person to have this name on the channel. The second
DNC.
person was yeah. The second person was John Delarose.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Did it work for him? Is
It
it
worked
working
for
for you?
him. Working a little bit, not as well as it did for him. He got a lot of people after he changed the name.
Hmm.
Mine's a little bit, I think because I'm a little bit more, my personality is more well known.
Uh-huh.
So, and plus I'm like the third one doing it, so it's a little bit different.
Sure.
The
Tongue in
joke,
cheek.
yeah. So the joke is that when I get tired of it, somebody else will take it up.
It's like
It's like
th-
passing the baton down.
right, right. There's some superhero movie where they do that. It's like now you're the holder of the Green Lantern or something. We said we're not going to talk about the obvious topics. Let's be diverse
Right.
and talk about other things. Um, Gosh. So let me think here. I have my notes here. I talked to Doug Ernst. I know you're a fan of
Yeah.
Soulfinder.
Oh, it's terrific. That
I've,
book's terrific.
I've got an episode talking about Catholicism a lot with him
Oh, really?
tomorrow. No,
Oh,
it's
cool.
actually going up later today. Actually, I just have to
Oh, okay.
edit it.
Cool.
But I know we're mutual fans. You've read Soulfinder. What did you think of it?
Well, I thought it was really well researched and very well written. It wasn't like you could see it being like a really well done movie.
Mm.
I thought and it was original. It had a lot of things to it that you don't see right now in independent comic books. And he didn't pander to Catholics. He didn't talk down to Catholics. He didn't make you feel like you were in. It was just a story.
Mm.
It wasn't anything. He wasn't going out of his way to prove a point in terms of just, well, I'm Catholic or I'm this or it was nothing like that. It was very much a very and it was a very simple story too.
Mm.
It wasn't anything complicated other than the relationships that these characters had with the main character and the other main characters. It wasn't like it wasn't like a situation where you had to figure out what was going on, and it was an open. The story began, and then it ended. It wasn't like there weren't any plot holes in it. There weren't any situations. Well, what happened with this person? What happened with that person? It was really well done. It's probably one of the best books I've read in a long time. And just sort of compare it to Earthworm Jim. Earthworm Jim is like a spectacle in terms of just the full scope of it.
Hmm.
I mean, he has said that there's going to be a next part to it. It's like part one was what the first one was, and then he'll take the story on to the next thing. With Soul Finder, you don't have to necessarily get the next one. You know what I'm saying?
I
You
see.
could just get that and read it and enjoy it.
It was
But it's so well done, you want to get the next one. That's the thing.
a contained story.
Right? It's a contained story.
Yeah. I've always struggled with that. I think it's because of the manga background. The page count is my greatest enemy, and I see that a book like Soulfinder is neatly packaged. There's no cliffhanger necessarily at the end.
No,
Whereas
there isn't.
I can't seem to put together a story that I don't know. There's just something about the way the panels are arranged, especially in the Japanese style of storytelling. That like I had a story that was supposed to be 65 pages, and I just finished the thumbnails, and it's 130.
Wow.
And I didn't plan that. The script is only 13 pages, but like let's say there's action at the end. The guy punches the thing, and he gets punched, and then as I kept drawing that in the thumbnails, I'm like, okay, this one sentence is taking 3 pages now.
Right.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I guess production-wise, it causes certain problems. But I'm pleased to see a book like Soulfinder find an audience. It seems to be doing very well, and he's working on the next one, so I'm excited to read it.
Well, from what I understand, that because of this review that he had from just some guy, he's gotten more orders.
Oh yeah, good.
Yeah, I seen a tweet a couple days ago
Hmm.
because of that. Also, I was just talking about story. That's the thing that the industry sort of suffers from, is that they're so worried about doing the trades, because the market for trades is very good.
Yeah.
They don't tell in the past they used to tell like one story and a couple of subplots, but the subplots didn't take away from the story.
Mhm.
And now you have a situation where the story is secondary to the subplot and to the overall story arc.
Mhm.
And some writers aren't good at telling just a single story and have little subplots and then move on. But then you have good writers, say like Robin Vedetti, who is good at the sort of overall trade paperback writing. But I mean, it's weird. I mean, with him, but there's some writers that aren't very good at telling a story within a story. They need like little bits, pieces here, little pieces there, and it drives you crazy, especially if it's maybe something that you don't really want to buy next time.
Yeah.
It forces you to buy the next one, which isn't fair in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's better to have a sort of invitation at the end of a book than a demand. I know the early books, serialized stories, were always about, they were engineered to have hooks at the end.
Right.
But I suppose, especially with books being so expensive these days, it's not appreciated to say, oh, this story will basically never end, so keep buying to find out what happens next. I know, I'm a very conservative buyer when it comes to buying books anyways, so I wouldn't put any money into it unless I knew that it had a satisfying ending. I think I wait on a lot of series.
I mean, just to go to some crowdfunders, I don't know if you had gotten Black Hops,
I
Hair
haven't
Trigger,
read it. No, I want to though.
but they tell stories in a way that you can enjoy it, and you don't necessarily have to get the next one.
Uh,
Some of the sort of Commscape books that I've gotten, Cyberfrog in particular, is the way he did it. What Ethan Van Sciver had done, it forces you to get the next one.
mm-hmm.
And he didn't have like a beginning of the story, end of the story. He gave you a cliffhanger,
I see.
which was, just as a sort of a storyteller, was a little unfair. But if you're going to do these kind of crowdfunders, you got to do it where you leave a good impression and you tell a beginning of the story and an end of the story. The one thing with Earthworm Jim, he has a cliffhanger at the end of the story, but you can enjoy that story and not have to feel pushed to get the next one.
Yeah.
And I would point out with the Bigfoot Bill too, because there's a preview in there. It's like if you don't want to buy it, that preview is so good that it's just an open-ended story. There is a cliffhanger in it because it's part of what Bigfoot Bill is in, but Bigfoot Bill 2 is. But it's a good story if you just want to read that. But he knows he's a very good storyteller anyway.
Mm. It's an important lesson that I had to learn the hard way, unfortunately, with my recently canceled campaign. My biggest thing that I was struggling with was how do I tell a complete story? And my problem is I needed a massive page count, like 200 pages.
Right.
And I realized that I can't ask for people to put that much faith in me blind.
Right.
So I got spooked by, I guess it was way too ambitious. So I said, let me just wait another few months, another year, who knows, however long it takes for me to feel like I don't know. It's going to take a lot of time. So let's say 6 months of full-time overtime production. I need to make sure that I'm not just sitting at my desk in a dark hole and then I come out at the end like, here's the book. I want to stay engaged with people. But yeah, it's a really important lesson. I'm not going to do the cliffhanger thing anymore. That was unwise. But I caught it in time, luckily. With Kickstarter especially, they don't take people's money.
Well, with the Mary Sue that you did on I guess on Indiegogo, that wasn't really a cliffhanger that you had done. That wasn't really that much of a cliffhanger. It's just sort of it gave you a tease to the next story.
Yeah.
There's a difference between a cliffhanger and a tease.
Okay.
That was more of a tease.
In the case of the next few issues, like the Kickstarter one that I canceled, that's the one that spooked me.
How many pages were you going to do with that?
I was estimating it at around 180.
Wow.
Which is not as big of a deal if I was working in black and white, let's say. Because the book I'm doing now, just as a sort of side thing, is 130. But it's black and white, so I can probably knock out 2 pages a day if I do it full time. And so the expensive thing really is sitting at my desk and drawing. That takes the most time because I have to sort of, in air quotes, pay myself,
Right.
Because if I'm drawing, that means I'm not doing other work. So to do it in color, that many pages would take almost double the time. And that worries me because I don't think I have enough readers who are willing to support me during, let's say, 6 months of production, full-time production, overtime.
Right.
So I could have split up the story, which is what I actually ended up doing. Part of the campaign, the Kickstarter campaign, was that I think I was asking for $15,000 in exchange for a 90-page book, which wasn't a good deal as far as I knew. But the bonus in there was that if I got overfunded at a certain amount, that I would double everyone's page count for free, in air quotes. So they would get the real book, all 180 pages, if I got enough backers to back it. But that was like sort of writing a check and hoping that the money was going to come in. And I decided it's just not a smart move.
No, I don't think that would have been good for you. I think it's just way too much.
No, and it would have created a desperate...
It's one thing if you have like a brand like Doug Tenable, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But people are just sort of discovering you, and if you fail, you fail big.
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, failing is okay, as anyone who listened to the Doug Tenable stream went. But what I think, especially in games development, I've seen this happen over and over. People get really ambitious and they don't realize how few resources they have. Like they're very excited, and that's a really powerful resource, but excitement can only do so much. Things like fatigue and cost are also factors. So I could have forced out the book, but then I eventually would have run out of budget, and then I would have had to find income from some other source. And then the book would be late, people would be angry, and then probably the quality would go down, and everyone would just be pissed off, including me, and then I wouldn't want to draw another comic again. So I said, why don't I just start smaller again? And then I'm a victim of my own ambition again. Oh, I'll write a 60-page book. And then it doubles the length. But then I still tell myself, wait, it's black and white. I can control that. And so anyway, I don't want to waste everyone's time talking about the business plan, but basically I've formulated another business plan that doesn't involve crowdfunding at all. It's far more traditional.
Right.
So then people can read it as it's being made. And if they want to pay for it, they can. If not, I'll make it anyway for fun.
Yeah, just make it anyway.
Yeah.
If you want to tell a story, just tell a story.
Yeah. This idea of income, people supporting us as we're doing production, I think the bubble is close to popping if it hasn't already.
I think so too. I think if you're going to do these kinds of things, I think you need to make sure that most of it is completed.
Yeah.
That way the people that are backing it don't have to wait long.
I think so. I think the longer, like let's say the average campaign is 60 days, maybe.
Like 45 days, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah.
If it goes so long that people forgot that they gave you money, I think there's some serious problems there. And business-wise too, I don't want people. I think I want to, if I were to make a living at this, I would want people to be looking forward to my next book within a few months. I don't want them to forget that I exist.
Right.
So
that's the major thing that the industry has an advantage over, is the fact that they pump out these books every month.
Yeah.
Even if it's different, like for instance, what DC does every 2 weeks, Batman comes out, and if the writer's always the same for the most part, but there's always a different artist. So they always had the books, coming out. That's one thing that. Independent comic books, in particular, these crowdfunders have a major disadvantage of. Yeah. And then over time, people forget about it, or if it's not good enough, they're not going to back the next one.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of like farming, I would think. Like we have to put enough nutrients into the soil to assume that there's going to be a future here. I'm the type to plan for a future, but I don't want to embrace this sort of strip mining style of just take all the money that's possible. Like there's only so much money per year a person's willing to spend. I'll take it all at the beginning of the year, and then just for the rest of the year you're not going to even see what I'm working on. And
the one thing that bothers me about Indiegogo in particular is that the creators have access to the complete amount of money for the most part, and Kickstarter doesn't do that, and I find that to be problematic. And we've seen that with this Detective Dead thing, where the creator took the money and was buying stuff, and then with Kickstarter they don't do that. And in fact, with Kickstarter, if you back a project, they don't charge you until the campaign closes.
Right. Yes.
Like for instance, I backed Common America. I haven't been charged yet. I backed Dynamite Thor. I haven't been charged yet. But when I've backed all these different ones on Indiegogo, they charge me right away.
And you have to ask for a refund if you change your mind.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and that could be problematic. In terms of who the creator is,
Right, because
it
once
can
the
be.
men. I'm sorry.
Well, it can be problematic with the creator because a lot of times they have to take it out of their own pocket. They can't get it directly from Indiegogo.
Yeah, because once the campaign closes or is funded, that's when Indiegogo sends me the money. So after
Oh,
that point, you have
oh,
to
really?
contact me. Yeah, I think it's a certain number of days. Like, let's say my campaign has hit its 60 days, it gets funded. And
Oh, I see.
that's when they say, okay, we're getting your money ready. We send it to you. And they keep a little bit for refunds, I think. But
Right.
after a certain point, you have to contact me and ask for a refund. And
Now your Indiegogo on your Mary Sue on Indiegogo. How many days was that
that was
on
a
there?
61. And
Oh, okay.
it went in demand. So that means basically it was indefinitely open. But there was a point where I closed it on purpose because it was running late. And then I
Right.
told myself, I'm not going to give myself permission to collect money if the book was running late.
Right.
So I basically shot myself in the foot and said, like, this is your punishment.
How long was your book late?
3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Oh, that's not that bad.
No, it would have been sooner. Actually, what was it? It was the end of November that I was finishing it up. And
Right.
then the holidays were right around the corner, and I did some research about shipping. And they said,
Yeah.
I think if you ship after December 14th, it's basically not going to arrive until after New Year's. So I said, I'm going to take an extra 2 weeks or 3 weeks to polish the book a little more. But still, the idea that I was late and it's like I planned this very poorly. Like I would be shipping around the holiday season. That's a bad idea.
But that's what Doug Tenable said, that it's difficult to ship stuff during the holidays.
Yeah, there's so much congestion. I mean, most people are cool with it. Like if the book is a few weeks late because of mail, who cares? But it's like
Well,
with traffic. I'm sorry.
I have like a rule here that 2 months is like the cutoff point. I think after that, then there's a problem. I think at that point, and I've been pretty much on the ball. After 2 months, there's always a problem with the campaign every time. If it's 2 months late, it's a problem.
There seems to be a pattern. I'm really sorry to get back on this topic. I know we said we didn't want to talk about it too much.
That's all right.
Just from a production standpoint, I'm not naming any names or talking about an organization or anything, but like if it's a habitual problem and there's tardiness, let's say people saying that they're going to be faster than they actually are, or things got in the way, life got in the way. Everyone has a different
Well,
reason.
well, if there's like an illness or a sickness, that's understandable.
Yeah.
That you can't prevent that. But if you're wasting time doing nothing,
That's what puzzles me. I see. All right, so say an unproven creator, amateurs, and I don't mean that in a bad way. A new person to comics wants to give it a shot, and they're late. Fine. But if you're running late, and I see you on Twitter all the time or on YouTube all the time, and it's like you're not working on your book, obviously. Or in the case of a writer, let's say, and they've hired the book out to or commissioned the book to an artist, it's like, what's the artist doing? Why are they late? There's a million questions that I want to ask these creators, and unfortunately, there's no good way to ask them. Like from a production standpoint, I want to ask certain questions that would maybe hurt some reputations or hurt feelings, and I don't want to hurt people's feelings. But it's like, in order to learn what you did wrong, like you have to admit that you screwed up at some point. And is it going to happen again? Is it going to keep happening? Like mismanaging funds, that's a big problem.
oh
I've
yeah,
noticed.
yeah.
Like once you get money from a campaign and I don't want to name names, but like if a person admits that they didn't spend it on the campaign or if something went wrong on the production end of things, it's like, what are you exactly asking your readers? Like when you post that, I screwed up the production, I'm so sorry. It's like, okay, but are you going to do anything to fix it? Can you do anything to fix it? Do you even want to
Right.
salvage your reputation at this point?
Well, it just sort of discusses this Detective Dead was pretty, and then he thinks it's funny to post pictures of him buying all these different books. That is that's a slap in the face in my regard.
I was perplexed by that.
Yeah.
I guess it was a sort of what's the word? An olive branch to say, look, I like you guys this much, but what what frustrates me about that is like, gosh, I don't want to pick on him, but like, he lost the files, if I recall. That was the big problem. That's why the book had to be canceled. And why can't he ask his artist for the backup files? Does the artist
Right.
also not have the files? What happened?
Right.
Too many weird questions. Like, wait, okay, it's bad enough that a person doesn't back up their own stuff. That's one person's mistake. But what about the rest of the team? I don't know. I have so many questions, but at the same time, it's like I'm so grossed out by all of this. Like,
Oh
I
yeah, I
can,
mean it's just ridiculous. I mean if you're gonna like give people money that you don't know who they are, and they say they're gonna deliver on something, and then and I've said this a few times that really the problem is not the fulfillment part. The problem is the production part. It seems, and with this particular creator, he had an idea to do a story, and then it kept bigger, it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then he couldn't pay his creative team. So he was getting in deeper and deeper. Well, why is this dope spending all this money on all these different books and using the money for his bills? Because that's what he said he was doing.
yeah,
And that goes back to this thing about Indiegogo allowing creators to have access to that money. I mean, you shouldn't. I mean, I'm going through some of these other like Indiegogos that have nothing to do with Comsgate in particular, and creators have had, like for instance, B. Clay Moore. I don't know if you know who he is.
I've heard
He's
the
had
name.
he's had a Kickstarter on sitting there for like 5-6 years, and you write to him, he doesn't respond. We all know what happened with him and Captain Cummings. He confronted Captain Cummings while he was having his dinner with his wife. And they just don't understand. You give people money, you got to deliver on what you're talking about, what you're doing, what you're going to say you're going to do.
Yeah.
So this thing with Detective Dead and that creator coming in and saying, "All right, I'm going to talk about it tomorrow on this channel, but here are all the comic books that I bought." What sane person does that? That's complete total insanity. And like I said, a lot of these creators, especially these ones that we don't know who they are, they've never done this stuff before.
No.
They don't know what kind of work, what kind of like, just sort of production, the sort of even before you start to do a story. Like, oh, I got an idea for a story. Let me get started. It doesn't work that way.
No.
Because a lot of times, you got to write it out. You got a thumbnail. There's so much prep work that goes into it.
Yeah, I was
When I was doing comic books, I'm probably gonna do it again. But the prep work is where most of the work is for me.
Mhm.
Because once I start drawing, I'm pretty fast. So it's a little bit different with me. But the production part, when you have to write it out, or if you get now, I'm going to be doing a story. I'm thinking I'm probably the best thing for me is probably to do a thumbnail on it, which is what I always did was thumbnail it out and then write in the dialogue and the background, and then when I do it, I'll do a script, write it all out, and do it that way.
Mhm.
But these new ones that are coming in, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. That's the scary part. They think, well, I got an idea. I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to make a lot of money. I don't have to do a lot of work. And then they get into it, and then they realize, oh, crap. There's a lot of work that has to get done.
Mhm. It's especially dangerous when there are just writers, and I don't mean this in a bad way, in a negative way, but a writer, I don't think, understands how long those hours are when you're at your desk drawing, and how much time it takes. And it's easy to underestimate or just assume, even if I ask an artist to do some work for me, they'll say, oh, I can do a page a day or something. And what they're probably thinking is the most optimistic, best case scenario. But that's not how it goes usually. You have to plan for so many contingencies. And like if I say my average page, I don't even go by day anymore. I say 8 to 16 hours.
Right.
Because that can mean anything. 8 to 16 hours spread out over however many days I can actually put my butt in the chair. And for a writer to be adding content like in games development, they say on a AAA title, you have to budget $10,000 per month per person on a games development budget. And I don't think a lot of these creators, they get excited. They want to make a book, and they assume the more money I have, the more I can play with. But actually, like the ship is harder to steer the heavier it is, and the more money you make, the bigger the damage will be if you can't manage it properly. And I worry that they get very ambitious and they think, oh, I'm just going to keep adding to the story. But they don't
Right.
realize that every page, there's a certain number, like this is how much it's going to cost you to produce it, just to have the artist sit down and make it. Maybe $300 a page, maybe.
Right. Right.
And that's, with penciling, lettering, coloring, all that stuff.
Right.
Even in the indie world, 300, I don't know how much every artist charges, but like it's very expensive per page.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was thinking about this whole thing. I lost my train of thought.
I'm so sorry.
You can edit that out.
That's all right. We were talking about the cost of production and.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. With some of these writers that are creators, they don't understand the work that's put into it. Like, for instance, just to go to the past, Stan Lee would write like at least 10 to 20 stories a month. And he would have different artists on all these different books. We have Donny Cates. How many books a month does he write? And he gives it to different artists. I don't think some of the writers that are within indie comics understand the level of work and the level of the amount of time you need to do a really, and I'm talking about a quality book. Even a lousy book takes a long time to do it. So that's why a lot of times, online, if you have like a YouTube channel and you like are very like hate one of these books, they get very upset about it. I'll give you an example. I reviewed a book yesterday on my channel, Spider-Man Noir. And I went through the whole thing about how the book isn't in black and white. And I don't know, you probably know that film noir was always filmed in black and white.
Yeah.
But with Spider-Man, they haven't done that. They've done it in color. Now, this book that I picked up yesterday, it was mostly in black and white, but there were hints of yellow, hints of red. And I said that, with film noir, they don't do that. And I blamed it on an editorial. Well, the artist on the book wrote to me. And he said, no, we knew it was like that, but this is a comic book, and film noir doesn't have word balloons in it. He went through like this whole thing with me. I thanked him. I thanked him for watching the video. I said, I understand that. And that was it. But some artists get very upset because all the work that's put into things. So when you criticize them, because all the time they put into it, we understand the amount of time that goes into this stuff.
Yeah.
So they get very, very uptight about it. So a lot of times the writers don't understand that when they give an artist more pages to draw for one particular project, that's time that's wasted.
Yeah.
And then if you have an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter, it keeps the customers waiting, and that's not fair.
It leads to a general feeling of dissatisfaction, which
absolutely,
that will lead to a crash eventually. But what worries me is, I guess, a sort of I use the term glass cannon, able to give a lot of criticism but not take it. I notice a lot of my fellow creators, let's say, are very willing to poke at other people, but when they are poked at, they shatter. Yep. Which I understand because, like, no one wants 100 people, poking at them and making fun. But back in art school, I remember, and even when I would do art classes from time to time as a teacher, the whole point of a critique is to help the person improve.
It's meant to do two things. It's to help the person improve, and it's also to help the overall class to be able to critique it without it coming across as being mean or mean-spirited. That's really the purpose of doing a class critique.
The whole point of learning anything at a school is to improve
right.
yourself, improve
right.
the people around you. And if you're let's say if I'm tearing apart someone's book because, and I just say it sucks, that's not helping me. It's not helping my
Oh no,
listeners. I have
no.
to
I mean,
say why I don't like a certain thing.
when I was taking teaching classes, they would say, especially art teaching classes, they would always say, when we go through these kind of critiques of your fellow classmates, don't say you like it, you don't like it. Okay, when you look at a piece of work that's on the wall, a lot of times they display it on the wall. You tell me what you see, but don't use those words. Don't say I like it or I don't like it, because that's a judgment. We don't do judgments when it comes to what's done on the wall. And when you talk in that kind of language, it gets, first of all, it gets the class to think a little bit about what's being shown,
Yeah.
and it makes it a little bit easier and a little more objective for the artist to hear it. And some of these artists, I've noticed, a lot of them don't have formal training, so they don't understand that. I've noticed that some of the and a lot of the artists don't understand that. That when you start talking about all these different kinds of pieces of work, they don't understand. Like if I do like what I said, the Spider-Man noir, I don't think the artist understood that I was just doing what I've done in my classes. You know, when I've had a class, is just critique the work, and it's not personal. You know, I mean, very well aware of how people take it, especially when I critique one of these comic books, because I understand the production level of it, how much time is spent on it, and a lot of times they want people to like it. It's just a natural part of being a human being. You want people to like what you do, especially when you're an artist. When you're an artist, especially if you're really good, everybody in the room notices it. And when everybody notices it, you get used to being told you're great, you're this, you got a lot of talent. So when you come across somebody who says, "Well, this is should be here, and that should be there," it really hurts it hurts the artist that put the work into it, especially if they're not used to it. So I've noticed that with a lot of artists, especially in the comic book world, a lot of them are self-taught, and they don't take criticism well. One in particular I know of.
Yeah. Well, there's a general attitude that I've noticed. I'm not like a huge, well, let's say the martial arts world, right? Generally, what happens after a sparring match or a training match is the people engaging in it will thank each other and basically say, "Thank you for helping me improve.
Right.
I couldn't have improved without, learning my weak spots." Like if I'm in a wrestling match with someone and they keep poking at a certain area where I'm vulnerable, I am now learning that I'm vulnerable there, and I have to learn how to cover that problem. And what I've noticed with a lot of amateur, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, less experienced people perhaps. When, let's say, going back to the fight analogy, if they get punched, they kind of fall over and say, "Wow, I can't believe I got punched." Whereas someone who's experienced with getting punched in a fight will just they'll get hit and they won't break their focus because they're used to getting hit. I noticed where a lot of people don't take criticism well. Like, for instance, let me use me as an example. Not criticism, critiques. When you did a review of Mary Sue, you gave me a lot of notes to consider and think about.
Right.
And if I was younger, my first reaction would have been to say, "Hey, wait a second," and then write down all the things that you said that were negative about me, and then I would make excuses. Whereas as I'm more experienced creator, as I'm older now, I'm like, "Wait a second, write down the notes and then study them, because what you were saying has truth in it. Whether or not I like what you said, it doesn't matter. I have to listen. If I want to improve and do better next time, I have to study what you and many others have said in their reviews too. Whether or not I agree with those assessments doesn't matter. My readers, I have to make a book that serves them. I can make myself happy, with certain, I want to draw this, I want to write that. But I also, it's a back and forth. I have to make my readers happy. So I have to try my best to please them as well.
As an artist, when you start doing something, you're so focused on what you're doing then maybe you're not aware
Yeah.
of certain things. So sometimes, that's why they have editorial in these
Mm.
newspapers and in these different.
I, I think we dropped.
Sure,
Sorry,
right.
could you repeat that?
I said with all these different
One sec, cut. I think we're breaking out, breaking up.
do a certain thing in the class, but that artist wants to do it.
Can you hear me?
Wants you to get better. Like with some YouTubers, they don't care. They just want to rip it apart and be outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't do that. I try to find whatever I can find that's good about it, what's bad about it, or whatever's neutral about it.
I see. Some of what you just said got cut off, but I'll edit it down.
Oh, okay.
I'm so sorry. The general gist of it, I completely agree with. Is I suppose there's on one hand there's inexperience. That is part of the problem. Is I'm just not used to being criticized. But then when I see a more seasoned person still not taking criticism, the only thing I can think of is they think they're hot stuff, and
Right.
I mean, what can you do if I was in a class teaching a class and some kid thought they were hot stuff and they wouldn't take any criticism? It's like, well, why don't you teach the class, or
Yeah.
why are you even in school right now?
Right.
Anyone who puts anything into the world, like who thinks they're perfect, there's no such thing. There are movies that are considered perfect that still don't have, they can be improved. And I think any lover of the craft would relish studying imperfections so they can do even better. I mean, that's the problem with George Lucas, even back in the day with the prequels and everything. And that's why he even sold Star Wars in the first place, I heard. He didn't want to ever hear any criticisms.
Well, the problem with the prequels wasn't the production part wasn't the problem. The problem was the story and the way he presented it. I mean, the first movie, the first prequel, it was good, but they brought in Jar Jar, which he overwhelmed the movie with his goofiness, and his role in that movie which should have been very minor in it, and he realized that. That's why he minimized his roles after that movie, and then the second one just. See, the problem with that second one is that first of all, you didn't have a good villain in it. And with Star Wars, you had to have a very strong villain in it, especially if Darth Vader isn't in it. So he brought in Christopher Lee. He was way too old to be any kind of threat to Anakin and Obi-Wan. And you knew that Anakin was gonna get him at some point, and he got him in the third episode. But what made Episode 3 talk about Star Wars? Episode 3 was so great because the villain revealed himself in the Emperor.
Mm.
And you started to see this descent of the hero. Now, I've been maintaining for a long time with my channel that that Episode 3 is the second best of those movies, because you see a hero, you saw his hero's journey through the first two movies, and then you see this sort of collapse of his morality and his collapse as a human being, and that's very compelling storytelling. But the problem is to get from point A to point C, there's a mix up with point B, and that was really a lot of it was that villain. How do you now Lucas had said that he didn't want to have a villain that was as big as Darth Vader, which was a mistake. And you kind of see him rectify by bringing back Darth Maul in the cartoons with the Clone Wars and they showed him in the movie Solo.
Mm.
But if they had him be the main villain, be so difficult, and then to see Anakin fight this villain, and then you see his descent into madness, into villainy, that would have had a great story arc. But he didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that second movie is not as well received as it should have been.
Mm.
But the Episode 3 is just a great movie, just in terms of just seeing where the hero was at the beginning of that movie, how selfless he was. He didn't want to leave his friend behind, and at the end of the movie, he wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
He hated him. He went from loving him to hating him. And even in the middle of the movie, he apologizes to Obi-Wan and says to him, "Look, I'm sorry. I have a lot of things on my mind. I'm very stressed out."
Mhm.
But then at the end of the movie, he's a complete total different person, and he's full of hate and anger, and he's a villain.
I mean, it all started for him with fear, also.
Right.
And that goes
Right.
back to the old Yoda line.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Nope.
interesting that everyone always says Lucas is a good idea man, but I think he needs someone to ground him, to keep him edited.
Well, he didn't direct Empire Strikes Back.
Right,
That made a big difference, and he didn't direct Return of the Jedi.
right.
He got like a classically trained director for Episode 5.
Yeah.
So he had a really great director on that film,
Hmm.
and that's probably what he should have done. Is just that's why those Indiana Jones movies were so good. He didn't direct those movies; Steven Spielberg did.
Yeah.
So that makes a big difference. You're right, though, about Lucas. He's a great idea man. His aliens are amazing.
Mhm.
I think since Disney has taken over, their aliens are not nearly as impressive.
No, there's a lot to. I don't know. Where it's still unfolding, I guess, seeing what happens with Disney and whoever's going to come into power after whatever its current state is. I think it's eventually going to turn into something decent, but it has to fall into the right hands.
Well, the thing is, I think Kathleen Kennedy takes a bit of a. I think it's a little unfair because she's got a lot of success behind her. She was the executive producer on the Indiana Jones movies, Schindler's List, The Goonies, Back to the Future. She has her name and hands in everything. And then this one property, she just can't I don't know. It's just not working out. But she has a lot of bombs on her resume too. This is probably the biggest bomb that she has.
Yeah. The problem with I hear that when new CEOs come into a company, they cancel everything that the previous CEO was working on, and so when they throw away the old canon from well, now it's what, Legends it's called.
Yeah.
And then she later says that we don't have a rich history to draw upon for these movies.
Yeah, it's
I
just
say,
dumb.
come on,
It's just-
honestly, like I understand maybe from a business perspective, she's a very talented business person. I don't actually know, but
Yeah.
what you really want is a nerd, a super nerd who knows the whole encyclopedia and can help dig.
Well, she shouldn't be involved in the creative process. If she's the head of Lucasfilm,
No.
she shouldn't be involved in that. But when you bring in a guy like Ryan Johnson who doesn't care about that stuff, that's what messed up those last 3 movies.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the last movie. If you saw The Rise of Skywalker.
No, I couldn't bring myself to see it.
The problem with the movie was it's like 2 movies in a lot of ways. The first part of it is basically J.J. Abrams fixed all the mistakes that was made in the previous movie, and if you took that piece and made a whole separate movie based upon that, and that could have been part 2, it would have been great. But then the last half of it was such a mess because at that point he spent so much time fixing everything that it wasn't bad. I mean, there were things in the movie that I'll give you an example, which I thought was I don't know if anybody mentioned it. I don't know if I mentioned it in my review. There's a scene with Kylo Ren and Rey where they basically fight to the death on the old Death Star, where they're fighting in these waves of water. And it was sort of like a parallel story where Anakin and Obi-Wan are fighting with all this volcanic activity going on, and you see the rage. And at the end of it, Anakin is a broken man. But with that scene, it was like the opposite. When that scene is over, there's no more giant waves. All the water has been settled, and Kylo Ren is a new character. He's a hero at that point. So I thought that was the most interesting scene in the movie. But then when that scene was over, that was it. The rest of the movie is not nearly as good. So that's really the best scene in the movie, just from sort of a storytelling point of view. Because you see what happens is, I'll give some spoilers if people haven't seen it, but the movie's been out a while. Is Rey is going to get a device that's on the old Death Star that's crashed on one of the moons of Endor, and it is surrounded by these crazy. It's in the water. It's in these crazy waves. She goes and gets it, but when she gets there, she's confronted by Kylo Ren. They have a big battle. But like I said, by the end of the battle, the waves have been settled. A lot of the turmoil is what was going on in Kylo Ren. So then, at that point, he becomes a hero at the end of the movie. But it's that part is so amazing to watch it from that standpoint. It's a shame he couldn't take that through the whole movie, and they couldn't have taken that one piece and done that with all the movies of these last sequels. It's a shame. They had such a great opportunity to tell a great story, but they like you said earlier, they rejected the past. They rejected having Princess Leia, Han Solo, and Luke Skywalker together
Mm-hmm.
in an adventure. Once they rejected that, it was going to be very difficult for people to accept these new characters. It's like, I'll give you a weird example. I don't know how much you know about rock and roll music from the past. Um,
Not much, but
there's a band called Genesis. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
I'm not sure.
Peter Gabriel was the singer when the band started, and he left, and the band had a great following. Most of them were male, and the drummer took over, who was Phil Collins. So when Phil took over, he was already in the band. So nobody was upset that they changed singers. It was just more of whether it could be successful. Now, years later, Phil Collins left the band to pursue other things. He just wanted to be out of the band. He's in the band 20 years. They bring in a new singer, completely opposite, a younger guy. He was 20 years younger. It was an unknown, and the fans rejected it because he came from outside. So it's very much similar to what's happened with the Star Wars movies. They didn't center around those three characters of Han, Luke, and Leia. Once they did that and started bringing in these new characters, people are going to start complaining. Now, I didn't have a problem with it, but the problem is, well, it's just so crazy with Rey. Because Rey there's nothing to her.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sad part about Rey. There's nothing to her character. There's nothing likable about her, and there's nothing cohesive. There's no reason to like her. She has no faults. The one thing you can say about Princess Leia is that she's not the most likable character. She's bossy. She could be, she's tough to deal with sometimes.
Mm.
But she's very likable, very charismatic too. Rey is not like that. That's a big problem. When your main character is like that, and there's a very, problems with the storyline, just her overall story arc, and then they make her the granddaughter of the main villain, of Palpatine, it falls apart. They didn't say in the first episode who Rey was, or even in the first episode they didn't do that either. So at the end it's like, well, where's Palpatine been? They didn't even explain that.
Mm.
They didn't explain how he had children. It's just so weird. They just sort of threw it all in there to make it better. They just put the Emperor in at the end because everybody knows he's the main villain. Mm-hmm. And they needed a really strong villain because they didn't have Darth Vader.
And Johnson killed Snoke, so...
Well, he wasn't a good villain anyway because he was just there. And then they just sort of explained that the Emperor created him, which was silly,
What I get the feeling with Abrams, he makes decisions based on what's the most surprising, and then he ties the knots behind him, the loose ends. And in storytelling, one of my favorite things is foreshadowing, hints. Even if people figure it out ahead of time, I don't mind that. Like, for instance, my next story, it's fairly obvious to know what's going to happen. But I think, all right, Alfred Hitchcock said, you want to create suspense, you show the bomb under the table early. And then you have the whole scene play out of people talking and the timers going down. And the audience knows that there's a bomb, but the characters don't know. So part of the suspense is what's going to happen when they find out. Are they going to find out?
Right.
So it's okay for the director and the audience to wink at each other and say, she's a Palpatine, but she doesn't know. What are they gonna do when they find out?
Right.
That would have been fine to have revealed that even at the beginning. But they didn't have a plan. And one of the key things with storytelling, I always use Lord of the Rings as an example. He thought about that story for decades before it was finalized, and he had lots of time to think about all the different story arcs and everything.
You talk about Peter Jackson, right?
Forgive me, Tolkien. But by the time Peter Jackson got to it, the book was already written.
Right.
So all of that stuff, all the foreshadowing, he could have put that at the very beginning of the first movie, and only people that knew the story already would see all the hints, and that would give them even more pleasure storytelling. So
I never read those books when I first saw them in the movies. The first time I had any exposure to the Lord of the Rings, and that's actually had a great effect on my work. To be honest with you,
I see. Yeah, I didn't. No, I actually hated them when I was younger.
Oh, really?
I hated the movies. I thought they were
Right.
boring. And then,
Oh, really?
when I saw them as an older person, just a few years later, whatever, and then I was like, wait, are these movies awesome? I can't tell. And then I saw the extended edition, and I loved it
Yeah.
because I really sat down. And I think
Yeah.
part of the reason I didn't like it was because in the theater I was just uncomfortable and bored. But when I gave myself permission to take breaks, I realized, no, this is actually amazing. And then I read the books after the fact, and I loved them even more. But
I didn't like the Hobbit movies though. Those movies I didn't like,
I agree. Yeah.
and that's the basis for the whole series. Is
Yeah.
that Hobbit book?
Well, I think those adaptations were done in bad faith was the problem.
Yeah.
They tried to insert things that weren't in the originals, and they tried to take a lot of creative liberties, which is what I saw happening with Star Wars. One of my biggest criticisms with the Star Wars movies, the recent ones, is they don't seem to revere the original source material as much as they should have. This sort of like, we're going to take it and do whatever we want with it attitude does not work with people who love.
I know that it's just ridiculous. Even you have like 35, 40 years of this, and people know it.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to be truthful to it. That's the problem.
And
If you want to tell like a brand new story, tell a brand new story.
right.
Stan Lee always said, before he passed away, he's like, I don't have any problem with a diverse character, but you don't have to take away from an old character by making it a different race or religion.
No.
Just tell a new story with a new character. Maybe that new character could be interesting on its own. That's the problem with Hollywood and the comic book industry to a certain degree. I mean, the comic book industry's gotten a little bit better. I will say that's from 2 years ago, because they do still do their diversity books, but they do stay true to the older characters. I mean, they've gotten a little bit better. But that's a problem in Hollywood. They keep talking about getting a new James Bond. You had James Bond around for 60 years, actually longer than that, and everybody knows them. Just they want to talk about, well, they want to get what's his name from
Idris Elba.
Yeah, they want to have him in there. They want to have a woman doing it. No, everybody knows who James Bond is. Everybody knows what kind of character he is. He's a womanizer. He's a spy. He's not a perfect character. And they want to make it seem like people are perfect. People aren't perfect. That's the problem in Hollywood. Is they want to present these new characters within these old stories and make them perfect. Nobody's going to go and watch them.
I guess it's a marketing problem. Is they want the IP, they want the recognizable name, and then they want to do new things with it. Because creating a new IP is really difficult and expensive, and most people don't pay attention. They like things that are familiar. But I think that's, I hesitate to even say the words the fandom menace, but when it started, it made sense because they're taking all the things that we like and they're changing them. And it's like all of our memories are being destroyed. And I get that. Unfortunately, it was perverted into something else, but which is ironic because the very thing they were criticizing, they have turned into, it seems like. But I notice that they're scared of trying new ideas because then that makes them no different than, say, an indie creator creating a new character.
Well, right. They don't want to take a chance. I mean, you could do a good idea. They don't want to do it because I think a lot of it is now you're dealing with a lot of money. I think that's a lot of it. Plus the corporate system doesn't want to take a chance on an unknown property and take that risk.
It's funny because that's where indie comics, like even when Spawn was a new thing, who would have thought that Spawn would blow up the way it did?
Or Hellboy.
Right. These are new ideas that they have to
It,
take risks on.
Hellboy. The first issue of Hellboy is not in his book. You know,
Yeah.
his first appearance showed up in a John Byrne book from Dark Horse,
Mhm.
and he was just a throwaway character. He was shown as an imaginary character within this world of the Next Men. And John Byrne didn't draw it; it was Mike Mignola who drew it, but John Byrne wrote the story. And that's the first. I have that issue here at my at the at the comic book hut. So so that character was just a throwaway character that Mike Mignola had that John Byrne liked,
Mhm.
and look how big that character is, and how big Mike Mignola is.
Mhm.
He's got the movies, he's had cartoons. The comic book is still going on, and it's funny. I bought the book. I bought a book 2 years ago. I didn't like it,
Huh.
and it was boring. But I love the movies. The movies are great.
Mhm.
The Ron Perlman movies,
Yeah. It's interesting that I always saw indie comics as a sort of petri dish for new ideas,
Right.
where for a relatively low amount of money, you can hire an artist and a writer or somebody, get a little team together to just try out new ideas. And whatever seems to click with the zeitgeist of the times, that's what gets the big Hollywood treatment, let's say. If any of these indie books ever explodes, it's only
Well,
because.
just looking at it from my own perspective, if there was an indie book or an indie property that could really explode,
Yeah.
is this Black Ops thing.
Oh, yeah?
I think so because you have a commando type character, and they put it in the form of a rabbit.
Mhm.
That would be something very different. And the rabbit doesn't talk. He doesn't talk. He would be the main character. I mean, look at this success with Sonic. I could see them doing something like that. I mean, the team might not probably. Tim's probably going to dread me saying this. I think a lot of people are going to be pissed off that I mentioned this, but I could see that character specifically be a big movie because it's different,
Mhm.
and that you have a character that is not a human being, but he does all these kind of human things. So, and I find it and they're very good at telling a story specifically that I think it would catch on. But they're very indie right now, but they're very successful.
Mhm.
But that would be something that Hollywood could do, but they just don't want to take a chance on something like this or something like that.
I guess they need to see if something will explode first. Like,
Right.
I mean, a lot of Image properties blew up at that time, where it's
Well, just a little while ago, Common America sold out
yes,
on Kickstarter. That they have no more copies to sell.
Mhm.
So if you're like a movie studio, that would be something to look at because I'm telling you, I think that would make for a great movie. I think people would really like it,
Mhm.
and it's new, it's original. The ideas are original. They have original characters in that thing. They have a beautiful woman in it in this hair trigger. They have spies in it. It's very different. It's like I said, it takes the commando idea and they put a real twist on it.
Man, I got to talk to Tim Lim sometime again.
Yeah.
He's I think one of the fastest. Him and Doug Tenaple are what they're putting out like 3-4 books a year.
Yeah,
it feels
he's
like.
very. His work ethic is through the roof,
These guys are nuts.
and they're very smart and they're very original in how they think. I mean, Tim is. I mean, I talked to Tim on his channel. He's very smart.
I mean, he
that's
was a doctor, right?
Yeah. He's he's a doctor during the day, and then he does
Moonlights
his
as
book,
a comics creator.
and he's a comics creator at night.
Jeez. I always joke, I grew up with a lot of Asians, and I was
Yeah.
like, they have a thing with their parents. Like, they're so strict, and I don't know how they find the energy for this stuff. I'm so jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, he's nuts. But anyway, so I find inspiration by guys like him and Doug and all those guys. Like,
Yeah.
they're really putting out books fast, and they're good. And
Right.
I think that's the...
Well, part of it's the story. They're more interested in the story. If you have a good story,
Yeah.
that's the thing that drives them. They're not into making art. Making art is one thing. Telling a story is something else. We have a lot of books that are indie books that are pieces of art. There's no story to be told.
I see.
But with Tim Lim, Doug TenNapel, them specifically, they're more interested in the story. What kind of story are they trying to tell? And if you're story driven, you could tell between them and those that are trying just to make art.
I guess the medium of comics has to be a marriage of story and art. But if we focus too much on the art aspect, I mean, an 80-page book that looks beautiful is nice, but I don't know. I tend to think in terms of volume when it comes to storytelling, but that's because of my background with manga.
Well, the thing about it, if it justifies the story, then it's not a problem.
Yeah.
But if you're creating new pages just to create new pages and it takes away from your story, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. Shoot, I mean, that's what I'm thinking about right now, and I know you have to go soon, so I guess we can end soon. But yeah, the thing that I'm juggling right now is I have my thumbnails written out. I printed the book out, and
Right.
I'm staring at it. It's on my couch, and I'm thinking, okay, so this is the map, and I'm not going to deviate. I'm not going to add any panels. I'm not going to change anything unless I decide, that piece of dialogue sucks. I'm going to change it. But this is the comic, and then I have to decide, okay, how many days is it going to take? How many days am I going to allow myself to be, like, I'm going to pay myself to do it? But there is a very strict map that has to be obeyed when it comes to production. And there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that most people don't realize, the amount of planning that goes into these projects.
Right. I mean, just sort of talk about myself a little bit. I'm working on something, and I have it in 4 parts, and I've been sort of putting it together piece by piece.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, the setting, where these characters are going to be, having their story, and what kind of story do I want to tell? Who's going to be in the story? Who the villain's going to be? And that takes a lot of time. Now, here's the thing: I work a lot, so it makes it very difficult for me to really sit down and do this. Because if I wanted to sit down and really do this and not have to worry about working, I could get a 22 pages done in about 20 days, just to draw it, which is pretty good. That's how it should be. But if I have to work, that's why, when you do these Indiegogos and you have a regular job, it makes it difficult to do the work, to be honest with you. Because then if you come home and you got to sit, that's why I'm amazed at how Tim does his job and gets home and does his work and gets it done on time and gets it done before it's supposed to be on time. So, there's a lot of work that goes into this stuff. And even if you have a story that you want to tell that's in 4 parts and you break it up, if you say, for instance, this is what I'm doing. I got 4 stories, and they'll probably be about 48 pages each. And I've broken them down. I have titles for each story, the settings, what's going to happen, what kind of transitions each story. But if I do the first story and people don't like it, say it gets funded and people don't like it, then the rest of the whole thing is gone. It flushes the whole thing away. So that's why when you do a story, especially that first one, you want it to be a story that has a beginning, middle, and an end. So even if it's not successful in terms of bringing in new people, or it keeps the old customers, at least they have a story. And you don't feel like you wasted all this time presenting all this other stuff. That's the one thing that when you start doing this stuff and you're unknown, it's very important that you have a beginning, middle, and an end to the specific story that you're telling. That's why, with you better make sure if you tell a story that if you have an overall story, be able to tell a simple story within that where if people purchase it and they don't like it, then you're going to do more work for no reason.
Yeah, that's going to be not so much with this next project, but if I continue Mary Sue and that sort of thing, we'll see. I mean, who knows? I don't know what's going to happen later on this year, but as an exercise, I do want to continue this black and white book and see what happens.
Yeah, just do it.
But I mean, that's the whole thing about indie is we don't know what's going to happen. We're just trying, and there's no shame in trying something. I guess we could leave it off on that.
Okay.
There's no embarrassment to. I mean, I don't remember if I mentioned this on today's talk of the. I was thinking about the parable with having not a parable, counting how many bricks you have before you start building a tower.
Right.
I've been thinking about that a lot, and having the humility to admit that you don't have enough bricks. You have this great idea, you want to build a massive tower, but you just don't have enough bricks. And no matter how much effort you want to produce, like how much enthusiasm, if you don't have the bricks, you don't have the bricks.
Right.
So just being able to call it and say, I'm going to shelf it for now. I would like to build that tower sometime. There's nothing wrong with that. And I don't know. I guess someday I have to actually talk about what I'm planning. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
That's right. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting next few months, I suppose.
Right.
I'll be announcing stuff, but the important thing is I'll only announce it when I actually have something to announce. I don't want to,
The best thing you should probably do is before you announce it, you should give yourself a few months before, start talking about it.
Yeah.
I found that if you give yourself 3 months before you launch, that's a good amount of time to get people to start talking about it. Because you don't want to have like a couple weeks and then launch it. It's not enough time for people to look at it. It's not enough time for people to be interested in it.
No. I was actually thinking of
that's why they put these previews out all the time.
Yeah.
And the industry, so people get interested in it. That should be not to go back to the industry a little bit, but to go back to the industry does know what they're doing, especially when it comes to putting these preview books out. And they give them to customers when you go to the store, you buy them or they're free copies, and you can go through it and go to their catalog and see what you want to buy. So that's why it's important. You want to have a few months of people talking about it on these different, especially if you're a YouTuber and you have your YouTube channel and you go on different channels. It's good to sort of talk about it, months in advance.
Yeah. And also I think people respond to the art. Like they've seen it already.
Right.
I don't know if anyone listening is aware of, like, I did this illustration for Drawn and Quartered a while ago, black and white illustration that people got really pumped with. And so I did some more illustrations and people responded to that. And I said, oh, okay, I'll make a story out of this. I already had another script that I attached it to. But what my next plan actually is not to do a crowdfund at all at the beginning. I'm thinking of going on Patreon and just releasing the book page by page to anyone who wants to throw me $1.
Right.
And then I'll sell individual issues on my Etsy store. And it's like the crowdfunding will be at the end if people want a collection, but I'm just going to make this book at my own pace and people can read it ahead of time if they want to, or if they want to wait until the very end when it's collected, they can do that too. That's my thinking right now.
Well, my subscribers about 2 years ago suggested that I do like an Indiegogo of just all the different drawings that I've done on the live streams.
Yeah.
And what's good about that, if I were to do that, that's why I'm so like wanting to get my live streams going again on my phone, so I can do these drawings again, is to do like a collection of it. And then if someone had sent me a super chat, had their name mentioned in the book, and just talk about different things about the drawing and the person that gave me the super chat for it. Now, I thought that was a very original idea,
Why not? I mean, I don't know if I wouldn't say like buy your own printer and do it, but I don't know what the costs would be, but I say you should, there's no harm in giving it a shot. Go for it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope,
I don't have enough here from those old live streams to do it, because some of the drawings they're not good enough in my view.
I see.
And plus sometimes the color didn't come out right, and I did different drawings to sort of finish the super chats after the first channel was gone, and some of the color did not come out the way I would have liked.
I see.
Because a lot of it's all done traditional markers, but some of the markers didn't. A lot of streaking in it, and I don't want to like put that out there, because then I'd have to go in and I'd have to like Photoshop it and fix it, and I don't really want to do that.
Yeah,
I want to do it it's a lot of work, and I just want to like, if I were to do I also thought that would be a great teaser for anybody interested in buying a book from me with a story in it. Mm-hmm. Like, I like this artwork, I like this collection, and then he's going to be offering a story,
Yeah.
well, I might be interested in the story. It's like a teaser in a
Yeah,
lot of
you
ways.
actually no, you should do that absolutely. Do you have a timeline of when you might try to launch something like that?
No, that's going to be a while. It's not going to be this year. I wouldn't
I see.
think. Everything. If I do anything, it'll probably be next year because there's a lot of work that has to get done.
I see.
You know, and I'm working. I'm looking at this public domain character, and I have to do work with that. And I have my own stuff here.
Mhm.
One good thing about the stuff I have here is I have actual books that I printed out from the past, and I can use those and integrate it with what I want to tell, what kind of story I want to tell here.
Mhm.
Because when I was doing these characters and these stories, they would I had an idea for a story. I did the story with these characters, and that was it. But with this, if I were to do this, say on a crowdfunder, I have to outline it exactly and have to have a plan for it, not just throw characters out there in a story.
Mhm.
You got to and it has to have a payoff at the end. That's very important because you don't want people investing in something and then there's no payoff, especially when especially if it's one book.
Yeah. I appreciate that there's a lot of thought going into it. I always joke with even my channel, there's a lot of junk in the world, and the last thing I want to do is add to it. But it's
Right.
good. Yeah, I appreciate books that are really carefully thought out and are not rushed and that sort of thing. That's important. I don't want to. I have very limited shelf space, so I only want to put books that are labors of love
Right.
on there.
Right.
That's good. Well, I'll be looking forward to that, of course, and you got to tell us about it. Well, I'm sure you'll use your channel, but you're always welcome
Yeah.
to promote it
Oh,
when it's
all
time.
right. Well, thank you, George.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate it.
All right. Well, I've kept you over time. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Well, I'll thank you for coming again.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. Links will be in the description for anyone who wants to follow the Hut or whatever name you're going by nowadays.
It's now diversity in comics.
Okay. Well,
But I'm still the comic book hut. It's still at the comic book hut,
and
I'm
we'll
still
always
the
be
hut.
the people's champion.
Right. Right.
Very good. All right, I'll stop recording here. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll remind you all to please support our senpai, Doug Tenaple. Please check out the link below for his upcoming book, Bigfoot Bill, Volume 2. If you like this show and want to support future episodes, of course, you can like, share, and subscribe and all that stuff. Shares are especially useful. But there's also a link to my Patreon down below. If you want to keep an eye on what I'm working on now, a short comic called Bad Dreams, you can also follow me on Twitter for updates. I'll talk to you guys next time.